All right, there we go. Let's see, who are we seeing here? I see North State, Nova, UNC, Joplin, NYU, Maryland. Got some presidents, some VPs. So if anyone's just joining us, go ahead and put your chapter name and your position in the chat to introduce yourselves. We'll officially get started in a couple minutes. Let's see, how many people do we have here? 40 participants. Awesome, guys. Rutgers, Temple. Should I start naming districts too? We'll give people like one more minute and then we'll get things going. Oh, District 5, there we go. Great. See some District 6, District 2, District 10. I bet we have every district represented. All right. Let's go ahead and get things officially started. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to tonight's session. This is Elevate Your Leadership, Strategies for Success, the second session in the inaugural ASDA Chapter Leadership Academy. I'm Kylie Weller. I'm ASDA's Chapter Engagement Manager, and I'll be helping moderate tonight's session along with our speaker, Dr. Craig McKenzie. We're so excited to have all of you with us tonight, and this session is designed to help you distinguish between leadership styles, identify the key components to leadership and how it relates to your success as a chapter leader, consider leadership tactics to utilize in different situations and how to work effectively with others, and learn how to identify the leadership style of your peers to effectively delegate and lead at your chapter. When this session is over, you should plan to schedule a meeting with your boards to share the information that you learned tonight. You'll want to include key highlights and items for your chapter to discuss, so definitely take a few notes as you listen. And as you listen and participate in tonight's session, consider how the information shared threads its way through both the presentation and the work you're doing at your chapters. If you have questions during the presentation, you can type them in the chat and we'll have time to answer questions at the end. We'll also provide our contact information for National ASDA and Dr. McKenzie if you'd like to email us directly. Now let me formally introduce our speaker, Dr. Craig McKenzie. Dr. McKenzie is an assistant professor of dental anesthesiology at the University of Pittsburgh School of Dental Medicine. After undergraduate at Virginia Tech, he was accepted to a dual degree program at the University of Pennsylvania, completing both a DMD and MSED. He recently graduated from a 3-year anesthesiology residency at the University of Pittsburgh Medical Center. During dental school, Dr. McKenzie was active in organized dentistry, especially in licensure reform efforts. He served as our 2019-2020 National President of ASDA. He currently serves as a member of the ADA's Council on Dental Education and Licensure, as well as the PDA's Membership Committee and New Dentist Committee. Without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Craig to lead us through tonight's presentation. Take it away, Craig.
Great. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Kylie, for that really kind introduction. It really always is an honor to be back here, even virtually with ASDA, and it's really an honor that all of you chapter leaders joined us tonight. I know dental school can be super busy, so I really appreciate the time that you took to log on and be part of this presentation tonight. Today, the focus is going to be on developing your leadership style, and I hope to leave you with some simple strategies to help you be successful in your role as a chapter leader. So the presentation tonight is broken into really 2 sections. First, we're going to be looking at ourselves as an individual leader and what things you can do as an individual to be a strong leader within your chapter. We're then going to talk about different leadership styles and when to use them, and we'll talk about developing your emotional intelligence as an individual leader. Then in the second half of our presentation, we're going to be transitioning to talking about some team dynamics and how we'll work together within our chapters. We'll first address elements of highly successful teams, and then we'll talk about some common issues that might come up at your chapter and some simple strategies to solve those. So our first topic, leadership styles. There's so many different like leadership philosophies and leadership models. And so when I was thinking about tonight, I really wanted to boil it down into kind of the simplest way. A lot of models, try to put people into boxes. They talk about democratic leaders, authoritarian leaders, servant leaders. But rather, I would encourage you to think of leadership styles as more of a spectrum, realizing that your leadership style has to be flexible depending on who you're working with, who your team is, and also what the situation and the task at hand is. The model that I think explains this really well is the situational leadership model from the Center for Leadership Studies. And I first learned about it during my time with ASDA as well. We're going to be focusing a lot on this diagram over to the right-hand side, and I hope the diagram helps illustrate how this model works. So on the horizontal axis, that's where there's the task behavior, or how much direction a leader is going to give to the follower. When task behavior is high, what that means is that the leader is highly invested in exactly what is done, and how the task is carried out. The two leadership styles that have high task behavior or directive behavior are the selling and the telling leadership styles. And we'll dive into all of these leadership styles in the next few slides. But on the other side of that, when task behavior is low, the leader is less involved in like kind of the micromanaging the details about how the task gets done, leaving the follower to be a lot more creative with the details. So the two styles here that we're talking about with the low directive behavior or low task behavior are delegating and participating. On the vertical axis, so on the y-axis there's the relationship behaviors, or how much support and focus the leader places on building relationships and maintaining relationships with the follower. So when this behavior is high, when relationship behavior is high, the leader is engaged in a two-way flow of discussion. There's a lot of back and forth discussion. There's frequent check-ins and open dialogues as the task is being completed. These are the participating and the selling styles. When relationship behavior is really low, the leader is less involved in having discussions or building a relationship with the follower, and there's more of a one-way flow of information. In the delegating style, so that S4, that bottom left style, the information flows from follower to leader, and we'll talk about what that looks like here in a few slides. Whereas with the telling style, it's the exact opposite. Information still flows one way, but it's flowing from the leader to the follower. Let's take a closer look at these four different styles. So the first style is the S1, and that's the telling, the bottom right, the green box there. And in the S1 style, the leader is telling the follower or their team exactly what to do. There's a high level of task behavior where the leader is the one making decisions about everything, about how, when, where the task is being completed. And there's a really low level of support as well. It's not important to the leader in this style to build a relationship. There's no desire to coach, teach, or anything like that. There's a one-way flow of information from the leader to the follower, telling them exactly what to do and how to do it. And this style is really only helpful as a short-term solution when the outcome, when the product or the task is highly important. So when I'm trying to think about applying this to ASDA, there's really a limited few times when this is going to be a leadership style that I hope to see you use in the ASDA chapter, as hopefully as ASDA leaders, we're hoping to develop committee members and coach them to be strong, independent leaders themselves. However, the example that I can think of where this might be helpful at your ASDA chapter is if there's a short time frame, such as ordering lunch for tomorrow's meeting, and maybe you're working with somebody that needs to order lunch that's never done that for a big group before. And so you need to, tell them exactly what to do, tell them where to order from, how much food to order, when the food needs to be delivered, what their budget is, all of that information so that the task gets done completely correctly. Again, this style is used when the task, the outcome is highly important, when the follower has little experience completing the task, and when you're working on a short time frame. But since there's little focus on coaching or improving the follower, it should be used sparingly within your ASDA chapter and really only as a short-term solution. So that's our first style there. Let's dive into some of the ones that you're probably going to be using more so in your life as an ASDA leader and beyond. So let's talk about the S2 style, the selling style. In this style, the leader is focused on providing expertise and direction, but engages in a discussion with the follower to sell their idea. So there is still a high level of task behavior, like we saw in the previous leadership style. The leader is still the one making decisions of exactly how, when, where the task is being completed, just like the telling style. But what sets this one apart is the high level of support and a desire to build or maintain a relationship. So there's this two-way flow of communication. There's questions that are answered. There's that coaching mentality, where there's still a lot of hand-holding because the outcome of the task remains highly important. We're going to see this a lot in our ASDA chapter, especially this time of year when you guys as executive committee members, leaders back at your chapter, are working with brand new, especially like D1 committee members that are just starting to catch the ASDA fever. So an example that I can think of here is maybe the treasurers, if there's any treasurers on this meeting, if you're working with a brand new vendor committee fair member and you have to negotiate contracts with a vendor. So the experienced treasurer is going to closely guide the brand new committee member in the negotiation and signing of the contract. Like, let's be real here. We're talking about chapter money, fundraising, a very important task. So task behavior, directive behavior needs to be pretty high here because the task matters. But rather, we are hoping to develop our future treasurers out of these committee members that we're working with. So we also need to provide a lot of support, coaching, hand-holding, so that next time when it's time to look at a contract or talk to a vendor, that person now has a new set of skills. Remember, in ASDA, we're always training our future chapter leadership. So this is an important style because it ensures the level of support is given to the committee member, and that remains high as well. So we're not just focused on the task, but we're focused on people as well here within this style. All right, so another style that we're often going to see within our ASDA leadership is the S3 style, or the participating leadership style. In this style, the leader allows the follower to make the decisions, but remains involved in providing motivation and support. So here, looking at the level of task behavior, it's low because the follower is the one that's making the decisions about how, when, where, what the task is being completed. But there still has to be a high level of support. And the level of support here is important to maintain that relationship. There's still a two-way flow of communication in this leadership style between leader and follower, with the leader mostly serving as kind of like that cheerleader or motivator to help the task get done. This is a great style to use when the followers, the committee members that you're working with, have the ability, the experience, or maybe that creative mindset to do a really good job accomplishing this task. But it's also okay to think about using this style when the outcome is less important, and you want to give your follower an opportunity to be a little bit more creative and showcase their skills and experience. So an example that I like to think about here is like event planning, and there's so much event planning within ASDA. So let's say we're planning a community service event, and you have a community service committee at your chapter filled with people that have tons of diverse experience providing community service in college, being parts of completely different community service groups in undergrad. So here you may want to give them a lot more freedom, allow them to have that creative independence. But if they're brand new on the committee, they're still going to need that cheerleader and that motivation and encouragement to plan that next community service event for your chapter. This style also creates alignment between the leader and followers. And like I said before, it's really awesome for boosting creativity, rather. And then our final leadership style that we're going to focus on tonight in this spectrum of leadership styles is the S4, or the delegating leadership style. And a lot of times as leaders, I think it's so easy to say, oh, I'm just going to delegate that and not worry about that. But hopefully you realize, depending on the task and the people you're working with, maybe complete delegation isn't exactly the right thing. But what do I mean in the context of this leadership model when I say delegating? So in this style, the S4 style, the leader gives complete control of the task to the follower. They delegate the how, the what, the where. There's a low level of task behavior, where the follower, again, just like participating, is making all the decisions about the outcome of the task. But unlike participating, there's also a low level of support from the leader. So you're likely going to use a true delegating style when the follower that you're working with has a lot of experience as well as a lot of motivation to complete the task. And it's important here that the leader not micromanage the follower in this situation. In this leadership style, there's a one-way flow of information from the follower, however, to the leader. So it's the exact opposite of telling where it comes from leader to follower. In this one, the one-way flow of communication goes from the follower to the leader, really just providing updates and a check-in. The level of independence here within this leadership style helps develop task mastery and autonomy of the followers. And in ASDA, you might find yourself using this leadership style when you're leading someone who's been in the same role maybe for a second year, or who is a very experienced committee member that becomes the chair of the committee. So as an example, I can think here, which would work really well, is maybe you have an editor-in-chief for your newsletter at your chapter, but they've already been on the editorial board for the last 2 years. They know how to put a newsletter together to get your chapter engaged. So there's likely little direction needed for that editor-in-chief. Delegating will still allow you to create a great newsletter, and you'll delegate that task to this person, letting them have complete control, knowing that you're going to get a predictable and really cool result in the end. Again, this also allows for a lot of creativity. But you have to make sure that your follower has both the experience as well as the intrinsic motivation to get the task done. So I really like this slide because it provides a really nice summary of when to use these 4 different styles. So starting on the left here with the R4 style, the delegating style, that's to be used when followers are both able, confident, and willing. They're high performers that are able to do the task on their own with very little oversight. They're high performers. Whereas participating and selling is when the follower's performance is somewhere in the middle. They have moderate performance. But it's important to differentiate between the two of those, because you want to use participating if the follower has the ability to complete the task, but they need that cheerleader. They need somebody to give them the thumbs up and encouragement to get it done. However, selling is kind of different there, because while they still have that moderate level of performance, the follower might not have the experience and the expertise, but they are highly willing to learn and are very motivated. And finally, the telling style, or that S1R1 style, is used when the task needs to get done quickly, the outcome matters, has high importance, and with a follower that is unable, doesn't have that experience, and kind of unwilling to do it on their own as well. So they need a lot more attention and involvement of telling them exactly what needs to be done. And so our last slide here, talking about leadership styles before we move on to some of the other areas, I really just want to remind you that in leadership, you have to balance the results, the outcome of the task, with the relationship, the people around you. And I want to talk about this because it's incredibly important in ASDA. And what we do in ASDA is important, yes. But at the end of the day, everyone in your chapter is a volunteer, they're friends, they're our future colleagues. So it's important to always remain relationship focused within your ASDA leadership journey, while still balancing to get a good outcome. And sometimes realize, even as that perfectionist, that it's okay to compromise a little bit on having that perfect outcome, as long as you're still maintaining that important relationship. Because maintaining morale and making people want to stay involved is so, so important. So at this point, I want us to think about one of the best leaders that we've ever worked with. And maybe that leader is a coach. Maybe that leader was a chapter president when you were a D1 or D2. Maybe that leader was one of your teachers or professors that you've had in the past. I want everybody to take 30 seconds to think about that leader and have a clear image, a clear name in your head of who that leader was that you enjoyed working with. And I'd like everybody to take a moment to write down a couple qualities or characteristics that that leader had in the comments, or yeah, in the meeting chat. So I'll give everyone like 30 seconds here. Think about that person. Think about those attributes. And go ahead and drop a couple of those things that made the leader so great in our comments here. Humility. Yeah, I think that's great. We've got a couple people talking about patience, understanding. I really like really good open communication. Yeah, we'll talk about communication because that's super important. Good social skills, so good people skills, working with other people. Positive, great. Good listeners, so that's communication as well. Great, respectful, charismatic. I'm seeing charismatic, so that's definitely like a people skill for sure. Great. So as you think of those, don't feel shy. Go ahead and drop those in the meeting chat. But I'm really glad that a lot of people brought up those items like charisma and just being like a really good people person. Because what we're going to talk about next is, as an individual leader, it's important to have that EQ, that emotional quotient or that emotional intelligence. I know everyone here is smart. You guys got into dental school. I'm sure you had great GPAs, solid DAT, and I know you guys are all great dental students. You know how to do the perfect root canal. You know exactly like how many millimeters the shoulder needs to be on a crown prep, all of that crazy stuff. I know you have the IQ. That's why you're here. That's why you got into dental school. That's why you're becoming doctors. That's there. The technical skills, the critical thinking is absolutely there. But what I hope to encourage all of you is to also develop that emotional quotient as well. Because while it might be the IQ that gets the procedure done, as a dentist and as a leader, it's the EQ that makes the patient feel comfortable in the chair. And then within your dental chat or within your ASDA chapter, it's what makes the people around you want to work with you as a leader. So today we're going to be talking about the 4 different elements of the EQ as well. So the first one here is that good leaders have good self-awareness. They ask for feedback from their team frequently, and they're in touch and in tune with their strengths and weaknesses. It's important to know how people perceive you, including your supervisors, your leaders, people that you report to, as well as your peers and colleagues. And then you also want to know how your followers, your committees view you as well as a leader. The self-awareness piece really can't be overstated because most people think they're very self-aware. And in this Harvard Business Review article, 95% of people think they're self-aware. But when tested with a 360-degree assessment, really only 10 to 15% of people think they are. So whether that's an informal just check-in with the leaders, peers, and followers that you're working with, or maybe you want to get really formal. I know the military does a 360-degree assessment on a regular basis with their leadership, where they have their commanding officer, their peers, as well as people that work for them within their group, all give feedback about the leader to help increase the person's self-awareness. So it doesn't need to be super formal. You don't need to do something crazy like that, but definitely check in with the people around you so that you know how you're being perceived as well and can easily check in on those strengths and weaknesses. Good leaders also know how to keep their emotions in check and convey that positive attitude. I saw a lot of people drop in the meeting, like staying positive, and all of that kind of stuff, and having that like positive charisma. That's so important to develop as an individual leader. You also may want to make sure that you keep those impulses in check, and especially in dental school after a hard clinic day, or maybe it's just like a mean email or some other sort of stress that's been added to your day, whether it's dental school or not. You want to make sure that you manage your stress before responding or before leading a group. So definitely know how to manage your own stress. For me, that just means, maybe I need to take like a 15-minute walk, a breath of fresh air, get a glass of water. Make sure you have somebody that you can call and check in with and just kind of tell them how everything is going so that you can have like that check-in with someone else. And then sometimes, you get a crazy email and you want to send back like a wild reply. You want to tell that person how you truly, truly feel, but maybe just save it as a draft. Keep it in your drafts for 30 minutes, maybe an hour. Go back and read that and truly think about it before sending. Never send an email while angry. Never talk to, one of your committee members while you're angry, because that's just never going to go well. So make sure you keep those emotions in check. Social awareness is highly important too. And what this is understanding how others' emotions impact the team and the dynamics at play. So to make sure you have good social awareness, try to understand how people are feeling and what they're experiencing. And there's just a great simple question to ask here. How are you doing? Are you doing okay? It's that easy check-in where you might not have had something completed by the deadline, or maybe somebody's missing deadlines all over the place, not showing up to meetings, and you're getting kind of upset, right? So first you're going to get those emotions in check like we just talked about, and then ask the simple question, are you doing okay? How can I help? Just to try to understand and meet people where they are. Being able to be empathetic with your team in this article was ranked as the #1 skill in business as a leader. So having empathy is incredibly important. And then last but not least, the last element of the emotional quotient or emotional intelligence is that a good leader has good relationship management. They are good coaches, they're good mentors, they have the ability to influence and persuade others. That's that charisma that I think a lot of you put down in the chat. They know how to successfully diffuse stressful situations and attack conflict head on quickly and effectively. According to this Harvard Business Review article, each unresolved conflict wastes 8 hours of company time. And when we are working on these things outside of dental school hours, our time is so limited. So it's important as an ASDA leader to hit conflict head on and get it resolved quickly, even when it's uncomfortable. And I think having some of these really uncomfortable conversations, what led me to be more successful with that was this book called Crucial Conversations, and I highly recommend that you check it out. It's a great leadership read and will allow you to have some of those conflict discussions so much easier, and it will really help benefit you as an individual leader, and it'll also help you benefit your team. So before I ask the question for you to think about one single leader that you loved working with, that was a great leader. But now I want you to think about the best team that you've ever been a part of. Maybe that's your team there at ASDA, but maybe it's a musical group that you were a part of, or a sports team that you played on in high school or college. Maybe it was, some sort of project group that you were working with during undergrad. I want you to take a moment and, again, clearly visualize that highly successful team, that high performing team. And I want you to think of maybe 2 to 3 elements that made that team so successful. And when you think of those couple elements, go ahead, don't be shy, toss them right in that meeting chat so that we can chat about those as well. I think when I'm thinking of my most highly successful team that I worked with, it takes me back to my second year in ASDA when I was part of the board of trustees, and we had a group that worked together so well, and it worked really well for a lot of the same reasons that you guys are talking about. Strong communication, listening, that's communication as well. Trust, yeah, we absolutely trusted each other. Similar values, so the collective goals that everybody had. I think all of that is incredibly important. So keep writing those down. I think it's great to have those down there on paper or on virtual paper, I guess, since we're here on a Zoom call. But let's go ahead and look at these 5 elements of highly successful teams, according to Forbes. So a lot of these you guys wrote down. You guys wrote down trust. People said communication. We talked about goals. But let's also highlight 2 other ones: engagement, and then defined roles and responsibility. So now that we've talked about the individual, us as individual leaders, let's talk about how we fit into these elements in our highly performing teams at our ASDA chapter. So first, let's talk about trust. So trust is the extent to which followers can rely on leaders to do what they say they're going to do. People rate a leader high in trust if they are a role model and set good example, they walk their talk, they honor commitments, keep promises. They are willing to go above and beyond what really needs to be done. So there's 3 elements to trust here, and that's relationships, consistency, and good judgment. So let's talk about these elements of trusts. So the first one is positive relationships, and that is that trust is based partially on to the extent of which a leader is able to create good relationships with other people and groups. So to instill positive relationships, the leader stays in touch on the issues and concerns of others that are important. They balance results with the concern of others, and we talked about that in our styles of leadership. They generate cooperation between
I
others.
signed up for the boat cruise this morning.
Oh,
They resolve conflict with others, and they give honest feedback in a really helpful way. The next element of trust is good judgment, which is the extent to which a leader is well informed and knowledgeable. They must understand the technical aspects of the work, so they kind of do need that IQ aspect as well, and they have a depth of expertise. This means that they show good judgment when making decisions. Others trust their ideas and opinions. People seek out their opinions. Their knowledge and expertise make an important contribution to achieving results, and people can anticipate a quick response so that they can quickly solve issues. And then the last element of trust is consistency. And that's basically to do what you say and say what you mean. Follow through all the time. Simply acknowledging the issue is there isn't enough. High-performing teams have people that follow through, and they follow through on what they're going to say, and they truly act in what they say. But if we look at these three elements of trust, relationship, judgment, and consistency, it becomes very clear that one is very, very important. And that's relationships. That's those people skills that we were talking about earlier. Even with just good relationships, you get to 50% of trust already, like that trust percentile at 50%. It's great if we add in, judgment or consistency as well. That can get us up to like 60, 80% of people trusting us. But if we just have positive relationships, we can get up to that 50th percentile. So if you're going to focus on one thing after this call, focus on making strong relationships and maybe having your next meeting be a little less business and a little bit more social and getting to know each other as people. So the next element after trust for a highly effective team is good communication. And successful leaders will know how and when to communicate. And I know I don't have to tell people on this call, it's so frustrating when that hour-long meeting could have been a quick email. Good leaders know how and when to communicate. And so I like to show this little like communication pyramid, with the top being like the most like touch, the most involvement with people. And those are like those in-person meetings. They're highly effective. They're high touch, meaning like people are right around us. We can read people's facial expressions, how people talk, the inflections they're using. We can really read all of that body language, and not a lot of communication is lost when we use those high touch point communications. But most of our communications are going to be like a text message or an email. It's that low touch. It's text only. There's no inflection. There's no body language. There's not a lot of back and forth. But good leaders still know when to send a text message. Hey, let's meet downstairs in the lobby at 8 o'clock. That's an easy text message or email. Doesn't necessarily have to be an in-person meeting to tell when we're going to meet for the lunch and learn. That's an easy email. But if we're going to be having a more difficult conversation, it would be a huge mistake to just send an email when really we need to have that two-way communication. Maybe that's more of a phone call or a Zoom meeting like we're doing tonight. I always like to bring it back and make it real with, it's terrible to break up with someone over a text message. You would never do that. So knowing how and when to communicate is so important. Our next element of highly effective teams is having defined roles and responsibilities. So it's the executive committee working together with the various committees at the ASDA chapter level, allowing them to have their expertise and some creativity to come up with some really cool events and initiatives, rather than the executive committee micromanaging every single individual committee within the ASDA chapter. We don't want the executive committee doing committee work. We want you setting higher goals and coming up with those strategic plans and the vision for your chapter. But we also don't want committees to feel like they have a lack of support from the executive committee. So there is a definite balance here, and it's all about working together. And then let's finally talk about our collective goals. So maybe your chapter has a mission statement. ASDA has a mission statement for sure. Maybe your chapter's put together a 1-year goal or 2-year goals that you can call a strategic plan. Maybe you have a vision for the best chapter in the whole country, and you have that written down. And then maybe you have some core values for your chapter as well. The important thing about collective goals is that you talk to everyone involved in your ASDA chapter to help put these together so that you have group buy-in. And it's not just the executive committee setting those marching orders and hoping that everyone gets in line. Good collective goals are done together with your whole team so that everyone feels like they're going to be part of the solution. So now that we've talked about the 5 elements of highly successful teams, I want to talk about 5 of the common dysfunctions of a team and how we can best address those. So the 5 common dysfunctions are absence of trust, fear of conflict, lack of commitment, avoidance of accountability, and inattention to results. So I think the first one is pretty easy and to talk about here. Trust is like the number one thing for a highly effective team. So when that goes away, the team falls apart. Let us remember that trust is relationships, mostly relationships, consistency, and good judgment. So when trust falls apart and team members aren't trusting, sharing information with one another, the first thing to do is go back to that like 360-degree assessment and ask for feedback. Figure out your strengths and weaknesses and decide the best way to move forward. We also want to make sure that we as individuals give each member of the team the benefit of the doubt. Yeah, maybe something didn't go great with the event yesterday, but maybe they didn't do it on purpose. Maybe they just didn't know or had the best intentions after all. We also want to make sure that we thank individual members of the team, make people feel appreciated. And if something does go wrong, if you know as a leader that you did something wrong and now people aren't necessarily trusting you, offer an apology where appropriate. And if you're on the other side of that, accept the apology so that you can move forward as a chapter. The next one is super common, especially since you're working with your peers and your friends. You don't necessarily want to, get in heated arguments and have conflict. But it is this kind of balance. You want a little bit of conflict. You want to stay away from the personal attacks, and you want to stay away from being in a bubble where everyone agrees with each other. There is a good balance here. And to help resolve this fear of conflict, listen to all members of the team without like any sort of judgment. If there is a problem that comes up, you as the leader, you as the chapter president, vice president, need to solve the problem quickly so that it doesn't snowball into something bigger. The biggest thing here for conflict is make sure that you praise in public. That helps encourage everyone. So maybe you're having a Zoom meeting or a general body meeting within your chapter. If somebody just planned an event and it went really well, say like, hey, like, good job. Like, you did a fantastic job, because that only makes that person, not only does it make that person feel well, and feel like they did a great job with something and they feel good on the inside, but it also helps encourage everyone else to maybe put in a little bit more effort behind their game so that they can be as great as that person that planned the event as well. But on the other side of this, if one of your team members is not doing well, a public forum is not the area to reprimand. You pull that person aside after the meeting. You have that one-on-one in-person conversation or phone call to reprimand or correct a behavior in private. So always remember to praise in public, but reprimand in private. Remember to go back to that communication pyramid and use the right communication when. So if there's a lot of conflict, you're not going to want to send out a text message or an email about that. You're going to want to bring the group together so that nothing is missed in translation. And then if you have to, set the reset button or hit the reset button. And what I mean by that is get the group together, acknowledge that there's conflict, and just agree to start back at square one. Maybe we just, we don't do the events that we have scheduled for the next month, and we start fresh in September. Let's start fresh as a team and see if we can move forward. Another one here, another common issue is lack of commitment. Maybe somebody's missing deadlines, or the stuff that they're just turning in isn't as great as it should be. So in order to help resolve this common issue, you want to make sure as a leader that you're providing clear directives and priorities. Maybe you're using that wrong leadership style and you want to shift how you're leading that person or that committee. Maybe they need a little bit more direction. You also want to make sure that those goals that you set are common. You want to make sure that you can align everyone around them, and maybe those goals need to be adjusted if not everybody is bought into them. Also make sure that you're coachable, and then set the example as well. Like if you say you're going to do something, follow through, be consistent so that everyone knows, all right, this is the standard. If my chapter president is doing it like this, well, then me as the chair for the newsletter committee, I need to follow through with my commitments as well. The fourth common issue within teams is avoidance of accountability. And so to help with this, I always like to establish and meet deadlines. So especially in your meeting minutes, come up with action items, make them big, bold, and red, and put them at the bottom, and put what the task is, who it's assigned to, and what the deadline is, just so that everything is super clear. Make sure you assign that responsibility super clearly. But at the end of the day, we are all, well, I guess I'm not a dental student anymore, but you are all super, super busy dental students. You have class, you have lab, you go home and have to work on this homework and study for your next exams. You have to make sure that your hand skills are there for your next practical. So sometimes within your ASDA chapters, I often encourage people to have accountability partners. Instead of just having a chair, have co-chairs so that they can help balance that load. If you're going to assign one person to a project, make sure there's like 2 or 3 people actually assigned to it to help get the work done, but also help hold each other to those higher standards. And then also as a leader, check in often with your teams and committees so that if there are problems that pop up or they are like slightly behind track where they need to be, you can address those issues early on, and then they don't snowball and affect progress later on in the semester. And the last common issue here is inattention to results. So make sure you can envision the outcome, exactly what you hope to get out of a certain project or get out of an event. Eliminate stagnation, keep that team moving forward, set small goals instead of one lofty goal. And again, with deadlines, like set like maybe like a monthly deadline and what is expected to be completed by then, rather than having the whole project completed in December. Minimize individualistic behavior and celebrate the team. And lastly, celebrate success. And I think that's so important. So this is one of my favorite things we put together during my time with ASDA. And I really think that this highlights 2 points here. We helped envision our outcome. So this is everything we did as the Council on Advocacy in 2021. But it also helps us share with our members and our community, our dental community, everything ASDA did legislatively in the year of 2021. So this really did allow us to celebrate success as a group. So with that, I thank all of you so much for joining us here tonight. Again, we talked about individual behaviors and leadership styles as us individual leaders. And then hopefully I gave you some common strategies to help your team work together a little bit better as well, so that your ASDA chapter can have a year of success. So with that, I'd like to jump into Q&A. And again, thanks so much for joining me tonight.
Thanks, Craig. Yeah, if you all have questions, I haven't seen any come in throughout the presentation, but please go ahead and pop them in the chat. Give you all a couple minutes to do that. Like Craig said, don't be shy. He's still here to answer any questions you all are thinking of.
And maybe these are like more generic leadership questions, like individual leadership questions, or maybe they're questions about how you can more effectively lead specific issues within your chapters that I didn't cover. So they can be ASDA team related, or they can be individual leadership questions as well.
Anyone with a question?
Okay, I have a question.
Yeah.
So, this might not be the most ideal one, but okay, I'm not a president right now, but I'm thinking of applying to be a president at a local chapter. I think I do everything that's needed. But how do you kind of deal with the fact that you're not the most popular kid? You're doing everything right. You are like socializing with the correct people, not the correct people, but like everybody, and you take care of things. And in my chapter or like some other chapters I've seen, like people with most friends get chosen as the chapter leaders. Like, how do you deal with that?
Yeah, so that's a really great question, and I'm so glad you brought that up. I think, a lot of times like elections can quickly turn into a popularity contest.
Yeah.
And if that's how your chapter selects president, that can be really difficult if it's through like a popular vote within the entire school. But I
Mhm.
think my biggest advice there is to always remember that ASDA is a community, and that, running for president or running for one of those elected roles is about being an active member of that community. So maybe if you're in your D1, D2 year and might not be the most popular person in the school, if you show up to every single ASDA event, and you're actively involved in planning ASDA events within your chapter, you'll quickly become, Mr. or Mrs. or whoever ASDA. And you'll be that go-to person when it comes to thinking organized dentistry. And I think that's a great way to kind of overcome that popularity game, is just kind of dive into that community as much as you can.
Okay, thank you.
Of course. I did see another question that came as like a direct message. So somebody was asking about how you can get that feedback 360. There's a lot of different programs. If you Google like 360 feedback, there's usually a bunch of like paid programs that you can that get that like 360 assessment for. But I think like a really easy way to do it is just to like go on Google Forms or like SurveyMonkey or something like that, and just ask, what are my greatest strengths? What are my greatest weaknesses? Some areas that I can work on. Just create like maybe like 4 to 5 questions and then send it to a couple of your peers. If you're like a committee chair or a chapter president, send it to some of your committee members that work under you as a leader. And then also send it to people where you're on the committee or whatever, and send it to like your superior or your leader, so that you can really get those different perspectives and get that self-awareness through the roof. But great question.
I have a question, and I apologize if it's not the most appropriate question for this specific presentation, but I know, like, I can tell that you have a lot of experience at ASDA, and so as you were going through your presentation, I couldn't help but feel like a lot of the issues in our chapter that are running through my head. I'm the president of our chapter, and I feel like a lot of the issues that we have is we kind of need a position overhaul. I feel like the position descriptions that we had in the elections just aren't super helpful or applicable to the actual demands of ASDA during the semester and the actual events that we do have. And that leads to like the planning of the big events that we have kind of falling on the shoulders of 3 or 4 people on a team of 16 members. And so I wanted to know what you recommend as far as like how would I go about changing the positions. I would imagine we need some new positions, and just to change the title of certain positions and give them different responsibilities. But where do you how do you recommend me beginning that process?
Yeah, so Jason, totally appropriate question. I'm really glad you asked that one. There's two areas I'd kind of like to guide you to with that. And Kylie, hope if I'm giving like outdated information, you tell me. But on ASDA's website, asdanet.org, there's a chapter leadership toolbox where there's a lot of does that still exist? I'm assuming it does.
It does, yeah.
Awesome. All right, cool. So there's the leadership toolbox, which has a lot of like common positions that almost every chapter should have, with like a sample position description and things that that person might be responsible for. So that's a great first place to start, is the chapter leadership toolbox on the ASDA website. And then coming up in November as well is National Leadership Conference, which is a great place for you to get together with other chapter leaders. There's several chapter idea exchanges, or at least there have been at past NLCs. So whether that's a formal chapter idea exchange or just informal, talking about issues at your chapter with positions, that's a great way to, pick the brain of other chapters to see how they do it, what positions they have, what they call them, what their responsibilities are, so that you can maybe start approaching your bylaws or your chapter structure like maybe midway through this year, so that you can set up next year to be a little bit more successful from the positions. Hopefully that helps answer your question.
Yeah, and I'm going to add one more thing to that too. I popped the link there to, there is the leadership toolbox that you'll see, but you'll see a few other resources there too on the chapter management resources page. That's the link I just put there in the chat. And I'm also going to put this link for our Calendly page. So as Craig was talking about relationships and building those relationships, we also want to do that with the leaders that we have here on the call. So we are here to support you all with the challenges and the successes that you have going on at your chapter. So with something like looking at your position description. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm interrupting myself, but I just realized that I only put the Calendly. There's the Calendly for everyone. But we would love to talk with you about that too. So we can look at your bylaws, we can compare them to those position descriptions we have there. We can help you connect with other chapters who might be set up similarly to yours and look at position descriptions and the types of positions that those chapters have. So please use the Calendly link for a meeting like that, or again, to share other successes and challenges that you have at the local level. So that invitation is to everyone on this call. Any other questions or things people are thinking of?
Just wanted to say thank you. That was really, really helpful.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Of course, yeah. Thanks for your question.
Okay. Well, we thank you so much for participating in tonight's program. Again, our thanks to Craig for delivering a great presentation on leadership. I love those questions that he was asking and seeing the responses by you all. Again, those relationships are so important. And again, we really want to create relationships with you all, get to know you, understand those successes and challenges that you're having at the local level. So please do use that Calendly link to share those with us. Your roles really are essential to ASDA's success, and you are all volunteers and your time is at a premium. We do understand that, so we appreciate you all taking the time to join us tonight and participating in this session. Just a reminder that we did record this session and we will be emailing it out to all the participants, and we'll send a brief survey too, so please fill that out, give us that feedback. We talked about feedback on the call tonight too. We want to ensure that we're offering the resources that you need to be successful as an ASDA leader. So you see here on the screen, you can mark your calendar for the next sessions that we have coming up. There's one on chapter communications, September 26th. That will also be at 7 p.m. Central, and we'll be doing another chapter leader speed networking event in October. So we would love to see you all at those events as well. So again, thank you all so much for your time and attention. We look forward to continuing our work together, getting to know you all, and meeting you at the future sessions and maybe on a one-on-one call as well. So thanks again, everyone, and have a wonderful night. Thanks again to Dr. McKenzie.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye-bye.